Two of the top defenses in the Big 12 face off this weekend as Iowa State travels to Norman to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. Here's a quick breakdown of each team's current status, keys to victory, and final prediction for the game. Yes, that intro felt weird to say. If you told me Oklahoma would hold their first 4 opponents to a total of 34 points, tied for second in the nation by the way, I would have told you that's wishful thinking. If you had told me I would be frustrated with Jeff Lebby's play calling, well, that's much less surprising. Let's start with Oklahoma's offensive performance against Cincinnati last week. Dylan Gabriel. He had a strange backward pass, a fumble, a triple coverage throw, multiple overthrows in what was by far a game where he made the most mistakes he had made all season long. It looked similar to many of the performances he had in conference games last year. DG is going to need to clean it up in Big 12 play, but I still think he has shown improvement and will continue to do so in the coming weeks. The run game continues to confuse me. It feels like a coin flip to see who plays, Walker and Major or Barnes and Sawchuk. Regardless of the package chosen, the result seems pretty similar. Each has their pros and cons, and maybe there's a method to the madness that I'm not picking up on. But DeMarco has to figure it out soon because the run game has got to improve. Maybe part of it is a tight end issue. I remember Willis last season pulling on runs and throwing some excellent blocks, and quite frankly, nothing has stood out to me in the tight end room this year. The offensive line in general, I was feeling alright about pass blocking, but the run blocking could see some improvement. But to be fair, they did hold their own against a talented Cincy defensive line. At wide receiver, Andrew Anthony has been impressive and he's built a great connection with DG. Nick Anderson is potentially the best raw talent of the group, and I'd like to see Farouk get more touches. On the defensive side of things, there has been a night and day difference from last season. This was the first Oklahoma game in what feels like over a decade, where with the game on the line, I would trust the defense over the offense to go out and win the game. Players were in the right spots to make the right plays, which was one of the biggest issues last season, and they're actually wrapping up the ball carrier. Surprise, defensive players can do that. Occasionally, Cincy did find soft spots in zone coverage, but the yards after catch was limited and defenders were there immediately. You're not going to hold a team to 0 of 20 passing, but the fact that the yak was limited is a great sign for the secondary. Stutzman, as usual, had an excellent game. I fully expect him to be winning some postseason awards. It was great to see the newcomers play well. Payne Bowen looks like a future All-American. Desan McCullough and Rondell Bothroyd both played great as well. Kanik was all over the field, and we did have that medical scare with him, but signs have pointed to him being okay and ready to play this week. The team totaled 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 2 interceptions, holding the Bearcats to 3 of 15 on third down and 1 of 4 on fourth, including absolute dominance in the red zone. Anytime you hold a conference opponent to just 6 points, it's a great night. Honestly, the biggest complaint of the day would be special teams, specifically a rough day from the punter, but if the biggest concern of the games for the rest of the season is a shanked punt or two, I'm okay with it. Iowa State also started off their Big 12 slate with a much needed win against a struggling Oklahoma State program. Speaking of struggle, that's been the theme of the Iowa State offense. Ranked last in the Big 12 in yards per game at just over 300 and second to last in points per game at 21. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that in their last 2 offensive stinkers, they played an Ohio defense that sits high in most statistical categories and an Iowa defense that would if they hadn't just got blasted by Penn State. But it still doesn't look great. It started before the season even began, losing projected starter Hunter Deckers to a gambling scandal, which is going to be a common theme here. That threw freshman quarterback Rocco Becht into the fire, who seems to have started figuring things out after an impressive 350-yard, 3-touchdown performance against the Pokes. Regarding receivers, returning vet Jalen Noel and Eastern Kentucky transfer Jaden Higgins lead the team in receptions, and Daniel Jackson has burst onto the scene with 6 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns against OSU. 6'7" freshman tight end Benjamin Brahmer could also prove to be a dangerous target. The run game for the Cyclones has been rough to say the least. They are second to last in rush yards per game in the Big 12 and only average 2.9 yards per carry, which is a drop off from last season, when they finished last in the Big 12 in that category. Their starter from last season was set to return, but then he gambled and lost. Although the offensive line is full of upperclassmen, one of which is suspended because of You guessed it, gambling. It's been tough sledding for the group so far. The Iowa State defense has been the consistent strength of this team, and despite having to replace one of the best edge rushers in Big 12 history in Will McDonald, they've continued to play well. Last year they finished 4th in the nation, only allowing 285 yards per game. This year they're on a similar pace, only allowing 7 additional yards per game and 16.5 points per game, currently 3rd in the Big 12. Iowa State sits atop the Big 12 in pass defense, in part due to its 3-3-5 defense and talented defensive backs, 3 of whom lead the team in tackles. Jeremiah Cooper has led the group as a ball hawker with 3 interceptions already this season. Nose guard Isaiah Lee was going to anchor the defensive line until he got popped for gambling as well. Iowa State does have a lack of experience at linebacker, which may be the only weak point of the defense. The game against Oklahoma will be a good litmus test to see where the defense truly stands, as it will be its first against, for lack of better phrasing, an offense with an actual pulse. You know what you're getting with the Cyclone team. A good defense and an offense that struggles to get things rolling. However, Matt Campbell's squad showed some fire last week, and if they build off of that, there's still time to turn their season around. The Sooners need to figure out how to get their run game going, and in my opinion, some continuity is essential. Get that backfield rotation figured out sooner rather than later, or expect the same result. Iowa State has struggled running the football, so I fully expect them to give Beck the green light, especially after his last performance. The secondary will need to be on its A game to avoid big plays, and shutting down the pass could put a wrap on this game. Texas is next week in what will potentially be a huge matchup of undefeated teams. Potentially is the key word here. There's still a night game in Norman to take care of first. Use this game to build momentum going into the shootout in the Cotton Bowl. If Dylan Gabriel is given time to throw the ball, he will pick the Cyclones' defense apart methodically. Pressuring him and forcing him to make quick decisions will likely lead to mistakes, and costly ones could lead to a more competitive game. Putting the whole game in the hands of a freshman quarterback in a tough road environment isn't ideal, and support from the run game will be vital. The Cyclones will need to get something going on the ground to stand a chance. The good news for Cyclone Nation is Iowa State had by far its best offensive showing of the season against OSU last week behind the arm of their young QB. The freshmen will need to replicate that performance if the Cyclones hope to go 2-0 against teams from Oklahoma. The last time I thought Oklahoma had a gimme win over Iowa State was in 2017, a matchup between an undefeated OU squad and a 2-2 Iowa State team playing a quarterback that wasn't the starter coming into the year. And we all know how that turned out. The difference is 6 years later, this Sooner team may have a defense. Plus, I did put some money on the under for Iowa State's win total for the season. OU starts slow, but figures it out down the stretch, beating the Cyclones 31-13. Another rough Iowa State memory was Adrian Peterson breaking his collarbone against them. He missed his potential Heisman opportunity that season, but should he have won it his freshman year? This video explains why. As always, have a great day and see y'all at the next one.